Hey guys, now we're going to talk about returning multiple values from functions in Python. So we've been learning about functions a lot, and we learned that we can return values from functions to give data back to where it's called, but you can actually return multiple things at once. It's a pretty unique thing within Python, which is pretty cool. And to do that, we have to talk about first tuples. Now, tuples are pretty cool. It's a ordered immutable collection. So what the hell does that mean? It's better if I show you. So if we do something like coordinates, we could do a tuple by saying 10 and 20. So what we've done here is instead of creating a variable that stores one value at once, it stores two values as a pair together. So 10 and 20. And that makes sense because usually in a coordinate system you have an x and a y, or maybe even a z or something else, right? Without a tuple, you'd have to do first coordinate x and then store 10 and then coordinate y and then store 20. So you could do it like this, but obviously this is much more concise. So in this weird definition here, this is what I mean by collection. It's just collecting multiple values into one thing, a tuple. And then immutable means it cannot be changed. So before we talked about constants, which are variables that cannot change, they keep the same value. It's the same thing. That's an immutable variable. Tuples are automatically immutable. So we cannot change the values of this tuple. We would have to reassign the variable to a totally new tuple, is what that means. So for example, we can't swap out 20 for 30. That's just not something you can do with a tuple. So for example, now that we have a tuple stored in this variable here, what can we do with it? So we can just, print stuff out like we always do. Let's say x coordinate, that's going to be equal to, and how can we access the value of a tuple? We can do it multiple ways. One of the basic ways that you can do it is by the index. So just like with a list, we can do coordinates and then 0 for the first value of the tuple. And then after that, we can do y coordinates 1. So just like we access the values within a list using the bracket notation, we can do the same thing with the tuple. So let's run it. There we go. We get 10 for the x coordinate and then y is 20. So that is what a tuple is. It's a way of storing things together that go together. A very common example are coordinates. The reason I wanted to teach you about them is because they're commonly used with functions to return multiple values at once. So for example, if we have a basic function like getPerson, let's just say that in this getPerson function, we do a bunch of stuff, but for now we'll say name is equal to Joe Rogan, and then age is equal to 56 or something like that. Before we learned we can return values using return and then the value that we're going to return. So we could say name, for example. So we can do name, but if we also want to return age, we can return it as a tuple by doing comma age. So if you hover over the definition of the function, it actually tells you that it returns a tuple. So that's how you know when you invoke the function that it can return multiple things. So that's how you can create a function that returns a tuple or multiple things at once. How can you use a function that returns a tuple? So if you want to, you could store it directly. So we can do getPerson, and now the tuple is going to be stored into the person variable, and then we can access it using this bracket notation here, right, if we want to. Or you could do something called unpacking. So we can unpack the tuple by extracting the two values returned from it, or however many are returned from it, into separate variables. So for example, we could do name age is equal to getPerson. So now instead of storing the tuple into this variable here, we're storing the individual values of the tuple, which in this case will be Joe Rogan and 56, into name and age. So if I just print this name and age, and then if I just print person, let's compare the difference. There we go. We get Joe Rogan 56. That's what a tuple looks like when you print it out. And then we get Joe Rogan and 56 as separate variables that we're printing out. So that is how you can use a function that returns a tuple. You can unpack it, or you can store the tuple directly. It's up to you depending on how you want to use it. A lot of the time you just want the values directly, so you decide to unpack it. But like I said, it's up to you. If for some reason you call a function that returns a tuple, but you only want certain values from that tuple, you can decide to unpack but ignore those certain values. So for example, what I mean by that is if the tuple returns a name and an age, but we only want the name, we can ignore the age by just replacing it with a underscore. So we're still unpacking the tuple, except that in this case, we're unpacking the first value into name, and then we don't care about age. So we're just giving it away to this underscore here to essentially get rid of it. We don't care about it. A tuple can have more than two values within them. So if you have more that you want to ignore, you can either, give it an underscore, or if you don't want to ignore it, give it another variable name to put it into. Let's do another example. So if we have a function called calculate rectangle, we can pass in a length, a width, and then it's going to calculate the area of the rectangle along with the perimeter, and it's going to return the area and the perimeter as a tuple. So then when we invoke the function, we can call it, pass in those two parameters as arguments, get the tuple back, and unpack it right away. So we're unpacking into area and perimeter, which we can then print out. Alright guys, that's it for this episode. Hopefully you guys found this interesting. Now you guys know how to do tuples in Python, which is again a way to have multiple values collected into one ordered immutable collection that you can utilize. And then also we learned how to return multiple values from functions at once, which is pretty cool and useful as well. It's a very cool feature of Python that you don't see in a lot of other languages. So That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you guys next time, and peace.